To Module 6. Module 6 is an important module, as are all of the modules, but Module 6 is all about APA and MLA style guides and revision strategies. So it's something that will likely follow you in many of your other courses. So pay particular attention in this module to how to format a paper correctly, how to format citations, how to format your references page, because at the very least you'll want to know how to access the tools you'll need to remind you about some of these things. But the more you can internalize this information, the better off you'll be. So there's a quiz for you to figure out which style is the best for you, given the field that you're going into, your major, etc. There's a practice activity, and then the discussion, which we're going to do in class, implementing a revision strategy. So what's my style? The MLA Handbook 8th edition, they come up with new editions periodically because they'll update some of the style guidelines. For example, MLA, not all that long ago, got rid of underlining the titles of certain works. So they're in line with APA in that some works are italicized and some works have quotation marks around them for the titles. So you can choose to use MLA or APA in this course. MLA stands for Modern Language Association. APA stands for American Psychological Association. MLA tends to be more of an English, humanities deal, history. APA format tends to be more for science, social sciences like psychology, sociology, social work, and even business. So it's up to you to decide which one you use. But once you pick one, stick to it because you want to, as best you can, really master at least one of these styles. Side note, I don't think any of you are history majors, but sometimes history, they'll use Chicago, which is another one, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to focus on these two main ones. So you'll want to take this quiz because it will inform you which one of these two styles is probably best for you. So I would certainly take the quiz, answer each question thoughtfully, and you'll know which style is the one that you ought to go with. Down here are links to the APA formatting handbook and MLA formatting handbook. Clicking on them gives you, it takes you right to the handbook. The handbook is great. There's a lot of information, but you can find the answers you're looking for when it comes to these styles in those books, so they're super helpful. I will also post an additional video to this video about formatting, APA and MLA formatting, so you can look for that. So this section will provide information on citing your sources in APA format, citing your sources, and provide practice for these skills. So this is invaluable. This is going to help you out a lot. So formatting your paper in APA format, there's a video here with the transcript also underneath it if you have any difficulty understanding anything that's said in the video. And then there's other software versions if that doesn't work for you for some reason. So formatting your references list in annotated bibliography in APA format. Your references list is that the final page or pages if you have that many references, and it lists all of the references you used for the paper. So it says reference lists employ a hanging indent. That's when the first line is not indented. Each additional line is indented for each entry. So this it says that actually right after. So word processors make hanging indents easy. So you there are multiple ways to go into it to make it happen, but there's a tutorial here. Students sometimes find it a little challenging, but I think if you watch the tutorial, you'll gain some insight that will hopefully help you to avoid any of those roadblocks. If you have any questions after watching it, please let me know. And then in-text references. So this is, you have your references page, which is the full citation for each of those references. But within the body of your paper, you need to put an in-text citation after any piece of information that you took from a source. You need both. Oftentimes students think they need one or the other. You need both, because the reference on that final page doesn't tell me which information came from that source. I need the in-text citations for that. And just in-text citations doesn't give me enough information to know which source you actually got the information from. So you need both. Down here is, again, invaluable when it comes to knowing how to create your in-text citations. And so there's tabs for 1 or 2 authors. If your article is written by 1 or 2 authors, 3, 4, 5, 6 or more. Multiple sources. So if you have a detail that's that is a piece of information that you took from multiple sources, it shows you how to do that. And then it also shows you if the author is not named. Since we're using scholarly works for the support of our papers, you're unlikely to have many, if any, sources without an author. But if you do, it's right there. So you have the example here, and then you have an explanation for what each component is. And then it also tells you if you end up giving information in the signal phrase, which is the phrase leading into the information, it tells you what is needed in that case. And so you want to make sure you really read this page carefully and that you understand it. Again, ask me any questions you might have. Then there's an ungraded exercise that I highly recommend. The practice exercise is it's putting your understanding to the test, ungraded, so no pressure, but it lets you know what you actually do know. Sometimes we think we understand or know something, but only when we apply it do we actually get to see if we do have a mastery or a proficiency when it comes to understanding that material. So quotations, paraphrases, summary, and common knowledge. This tells you how and what you are going to need to provide an in-text citation for. They're calling it an in-text reference, which is another name for it, but it's just that bit of information that you put typically after a detail that you've gleaned from a source, unless you introduced any of that information in the signal phrase. Right here is something that you'll definitely want to take a look at. It's block quotations. So block quotations should be used to include direct quotations of 40 or more words within your research paper. If you're using MLA, this is going to be different. But here, APA makes it pretty cut and dry. MLA has you counting lines of your paper, but a block quotation, 40 or more words, you want to use block format instead of just putting quotation marks at the beginning and end of the quotation and having it right in the midst of your paragraph. So you see here, it has some information in the leading into the quotation, and you'll notice some interesting the differences between a block quotation and a quotation that's embedded right into your paragraph. There's no quotation marks. There's the period occurs here at the end of the quotation instead of at the end of the parentheses, and so read this carefully, because block quotations don't need to be a stumbling block, but sometimes they are, because students they don't realize that they need to format a quotation differently depending on the length of it sometimes. So I wanted to make you aware of that. And then best practices for quoting or paraphrasing. This is something that was covered earlier, so this is a reminder here. But it's worth reading to really uh, drill home what when you should quote, when you should paraphrase, when you should cite. So I would certainly recommend that you look at all these tabs here because they contain some great information that will help you have a very solidly formatted paper without any errors when it comes to formatting and citations. So patterns for documenting sources listed in the references list. So you learned earlier in this module, or reviewed for those of you who already have a strong familiarity with it, how to what your references page is, what it should include, and what it should look like as far as hanging indents goes. But this goes into some greater detail about your references list. So you'll want to look at this carefully, make sure that you understand it. Again, ask me any questions you have about any of this material. I will hit upon some of this stuff tonight, but definitely read through this. And then there's some general principles for documenting, focusing on the author's names, titles, etc. So again, this whole module is just full of a lot of information, but it's really great information. I would strongly encourage you to consider taking some notes as you read because there's a lot of research out there that shows just how much more we retain when we really engage a text. If you remember back from English 122, there's a kind of surface literal reading, and then there's a critical reading. Here, we're not talking so much about critical reading because it's not about analyzing this information, but you want to read actively, not passively, and try to gain an ownership of this information. So it tells you, for example, a book with one author has a very basic format: the author's last name, and you can read it. But it's very much worth taking the time to look at. And general principles for titles. I talked about this a little bit. It's great because it talks about headline style capitalization or sentence style capitalization. There's a difference. When you are writing a sentence, you capitalize in a certain way. When you're writing a headline, you capitalize in another way. So make sure you know the difference between those two. And titles in a references list versus titles in a running text. It distinguishes between the two, and so for those of you who want a mastery of this stuff, which hopefully you all do, it's very informative. All right. So location information. So when citing books, you'll need to direct your reader to where they can find the source by providing either geographical information or online retrieval information. Documentation for journal articles or other periodicals do not need information about where it was published. Books available only online should have a retrieval URL instead of the publisher's location. I believe all of you are using articles. I don't think any of you are using books, but in other courses you very well could use a book or several. So read through this to give future you a leg up. So it tells you, it gives you a great idea of what to do for each of these types of sources, and it gives you an example so you can see what it would look like too. All right, and it talks about dates, general principles when it comes to dates. It really goes into so much great detail. You might want to consider taking a look at this whole module in chunks, so that way if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by the amount of information, you can chunk it together, like look at the general principles in one sitting, look at other parts that you can lump together. For some people, that is very beneficial. For others, they want to consume it all at the same time. So whatever learning style works best for you, know that it's a-okay. Alphabetization, when it comes to your references page, they should be in alphabetical order so your reader doesn't have to search all throughout all of your sources. Imagine having 50 sources and they aren't alphabetized. Your reader is going to take quite a while to find where the full citation is for some of the in-text citations. You don't want to do that to the reader. You want to put it in alphabetical order. Sometimes it can be tricky figuring out which one goes before the other, depending on how similar the start of the citations are. It covers that too. And then documenting specific types of sources. Again, you're likely to find your source, your type of source, relatively quickly because you likely have most, if not all, of your sources as a similar type of source, the scholarly article. So periodicals other than scholarly articles is on this page. That's not what we're probably talking about with most of you and most of your sources. If you have, actually quite a few of you are using online government publications, or research reports, white papers, issue briefs. So you'll want to pay attention to this entry here because that will apply to you. And films, audio, visuals. I don't think anybody that I've seen so far is using those as your source types, but it's there. Personal interview. It's a great form of qualitative research where you get a story as opposed to just maybe numbers or less elaborated personal sort of accounts. There's a practice, again, for APA format. Highly recommend it. It lets you know if you truly have developed a mastery. MLA formatting handbook, I'm not going to go into that because I'm not sure many, if any of you are using MLA. But if there are any, I can certainly make another screen capture that covers that, if that is something that will work well for you. So that's all that I wanted to cover in the screen capture, and I will touch upon some of this stuff tonight, and anything else that I haven't included in the screen capture I will also touch upon tonight. I will see you folks later.